How many minutes can we give those who are here to join?
I think we can give them 10 minutes if possible.
All right. So let's keep waiting. Then we shall proceed. Evening once more. As usual, before we kickstart our lecture today, I would want us to just have a very brief uh, ref- reflection of what we discussed yesterday, so that we are able to have a picture of what we intend to study throughout this module. So let me just share with you a slide, and can we see that slide?
Yes, we can see.
Okay. Yes. So let me just give you a brief of what we discussed yesterday. If you look at our entire discussion yesterday, we were able to understand sex composition and how to measure sex composition in our populations. But also, we went deeper to understand the analysis or the interpretation of the answers we get from each measure. However, we also discussed the population, the five main aspects of the population or of demography, and we were able to discuss the three key components of population changes or the population growth, or what we called the population processes. And we were able to look at births, what we called fertility, but also we were able to look at death, what we call mortality. And lastly, we were able to look at migration. We deeper went to understand how migration affects the population, but also how it affects mm, service delivery, but also project dissemination, project developments, but also how individuals utilize certain social services. We also looked at how it can impact on issues of employment, issues of culture, among other issues. So mainly, that is what we are tackling. And these slides are just giving you a quick go through of what we are talking about. You're able to see the population processes that we talked about. We talked about transition, uh, and this is where we ended. However, uh, there are certain issues that we shall be discussing throughout this module, and key of them is the population uh, transition theory, because it is one of the key uh, components of demography. And throughout this model, you will realize, even when we go further in discussing the theories of demography, we shall be able to continuously see that the demographic transition fits in. What I require of you is that you understand what the demographic transition is, because when you understand it, it will give you a very good leeway to understand the different dynamic patterns of population growth and population changes in all of your societies. When I'm talking about society, do not only look at the entire country. A society comprises of a lot of issues. A school, a church, you look at a component of a clan, you look at a sub-county, a district, a family also has these. And it is very important that you discuss patterns if you're discussing, or if you're a student who has gone through the demography class. So today we wish to introduce what we call the theories of population. This is very key if we are to understand one, the history Remember, we discussed history, but now here we are trying to say that there are certain phenomena that we are studied. A theory per se is a scientific phenomenon that is based on evidence. Therefore, we want to understand what are the population theories, or what are these scientific phenomenon that have evidence backing. So that is what entirely we shall be looking at. And after discussing our theories today, we shall be going further to look at some of the data collection methods that we can use to get demographic health information. So just to start with, there are different theories that we're going to look at. We're going to be able to look at the Malthusian theory, and we're going to be able to look at the demographic theory, but also we're going to look at the optimum theory. However, before we look at the theories, I just want to take you into a brief. And the theorizing about population, what we call population change and size, have remained an important subject since time immemorial. Many of our ancient philosophers, like Confucius of China, Kautilya of India, and Ibn Khaldun of Arab, Plato of Greece, and modern thinkers like Adam Smith, David Richards, and others, either directly or indirectly, have somehow significant theories in our population issues. And if you went more to read on the Confucius writings on population, you would be able to know how they influenced the Chinese population patterns today. Now, for instance, Kautilya of India, a contemporary, meaning that a companion of Plato, had written in his Arthashastra, which is a document that this Kautilya of India had written, that a large population is a source of political, economic, and military strength of a nation. Similarly, in the 14th century, the Arab historian Ibn Khaldun also maintained in his theory of rise and fall that the growth of dense population is generally favorable to the maintenance and increase of imperial power to the Jews. Now, this is just trying to show you that these two uh, particular historians, or what we call the early demographers, wrote down and realized that population growth, or an increase in the population, was associated to their military strength, but also to their political and economic strength. That when the population was higher, there was a possibility that you, as a nation, your military power would be stronger. Similarly, Ibn Khaldun, in his imperial power, trying to fight other countries, for example, the Jews, he realized that it was very important that he had a high population, so, or what he calls here the dense population, so that he could have the military strength to fight against his enemies and conquer. Similarly, if you look at the biblical context, for those who are Christians, Adam and Eve, by the Almighty, were guided to be fruitful and multiply and replenish the earth. This has been a guiding principle for their attitudes towards marriage and procreation. So many Christians today believe, because of the commandments, which we call also a population theory, because of that commandment that was given to them by God, we see that they want to be fruitful and multiply. That is why, in many of the Christian contexts, family planning today, or the use of contraceptives, modern contraceptives, is quite a challenge. The Chinese philosopher Confucius argued that a numerical balance be maintained between population and environment. Thus, he was not in favor of unchecked growth of population. He was the first who gave the concept of optimum population level. In the ancient Greece, the earliest thinkers favored the expansion of population, but Plato was a restrictionist who advocated as absolute limit of population. So you realize that Confucius and Plato were having a thought that population needs to be controlled because population and environment needed a numerical balance, with the thought that if there was a dense population, then it would impact the environment. One of the earliest demographers, Edmund Halley, was the first scientist to use death statistics in different age groups to determine a person's likelihood of death as he or she passed through each age group. What we call a population today in 1986. But as a science, it emerged only in the last 250 years. The systematic compilation of data was begun on large scale in the 19th century. So this Edmund Halley, we associate him to the life table because he was able to determine, or he used scientific studies to understand and determine how long an individual would stay if they were applied uh, the current uh, death rates or ratio that occurred in a particular population. So he was able to understand and is the author of the cohort analysis of data on age groups. So when you today you're seeing cohort analysis on age groups on the life table, trying to realize how when a particular cohort can diminish, it is as a result of Edmund Halley uh, scientific thoughts. Now, we want to look at a very key theory that has shaped modern demography today, and that is the Malthusian theory. The Malthusian theory of population. Reverend Thomas Robert was the key figure to analyze the population statistics. Now, his formulation on population was a landmark in the history of population theories. He generalized the relationship between population factors and social changes. He wrote an essay in 1798 called The Principle of Population, and Malthus argued that because of the strong attraction of the two sexes, the population could increase by multiples, doubling every 25 years. So Malthus stated that the population would grow in a geometric way, whereas food production would grow in what he called the arithmetic way. He contended that the population would eventually grow so large that food production would be insufficient. Now, the human capacity for reproduction exceeded the rate at which subsistence from the land can be increased. So Malthus, in his wisdom, was looking at his population or his society and was thinking that the population was growing very fast. However, food production was not growing. That is why he later argued that because of this, there would be what he called the population trap. So he stated that our population, when unchecked, increases by multiples and eventually increases beyond stated that because the population was growing at a very geometric rate, he stated that there shall be natural checks, and the natural checks shall be famine and natural calamities that would occur as a check, to these population issues. But also, he stated that if population grew in a geometric manner, then there are what he called the artificial checks, and these included family planning, uh, people would wars. These were now artificial, what he called the artificial checks, because Malthus then stated that if the population reached that trap, let me just insert for you here a slide. Malthus stated that if they are reached, if I could draw here for you, just let me just make a drawing here so that I could be able to show you the graph, just a simple graph of what Malthus was saying. Let's ignore this other. Okay, let me use this one. Let me use this one, and this is just a graph, and Malthus now stated that population would grow in what he called this this constant is what he called food production, and then he stated that population our population would grow in a geometric manner. Okay, I can't see any other way to grow that. But then he stated that because our population would grow in a faster manner here, you would realize from here, this particular area here, you would realize oh, sorry, just a minute. I want to draw something and be able to show you what in practical terms what I am discussing. But at any point where food production and anywhere where food production and population would meet, it would cause what he called the population trap up here. And when that population trap occurs, there would be natural checks such as famine, and that would be those are checks that would want to look at the population, which would lead to death. But also, he stated that there would be artificial checks. And today, as criticism for the Malthusian theory, however, in some societies or populations, whereas it is true that we see certain changes in food production in majority of our societies, we see that there are issues of famine, and these are natural checks, and that is why, as demographers, we are still able to agree with Malthus, because part of what he said seems to be manifesting in the modern world today. So that is the Malthusian theory. Now, there is another theory that is very key in demography, is what we call the economic theories of population. Economists and demographers propose that people desire more economic goods, including children, with increased income. However, career interruptions, desire for quality upbringing, and changing economic dynamics often lead to smaller families. What this theory is generally telling you is that When when an individual's income increases, the possibility that an individual would want more children also comes in. For example, that the person would feel they are more capable of raising more children. But however, the criticism is that as income increases, people start to have more career thoughts that I would want to further my studies. But also, because of the education an individual gets, they would want to have quality upbringing of their children. And therefore, these are factors that will lead to changes and therefore lead to smaller families. And what happens is that economic changes in the society affect the fertility rates of the country. That is why it is called the economic theories of population, because people do a cost benefit analysis. What is the cost of having a smaller family vis-a-vis the cost of having a bigger family? Then, when an individual does the weighting, they are able to decide whether they can have higher families or lower families in terms of numbers. Then another theory we would want to look at is the neo-Malthusian theory. That is a new set of idea or perspective that comes from the Malthusian theory. That's why it's called the new Malthusian theory. These theorists agree with Malthus's general perspective, but they only suggest that resource exploitation rather than overpopulation is the primary cause of world hunger. So, unlike whereas Malthus talks that uh, the slow growth of food production is the major cause of of world hunger. As a check, the new Malthusian theorists state that it is because of exploitation of the world's resources that the world will be in hunger, and therefore for them they do not look at overpopulation as an issue. That is another key theory that we've looked at before, but I would want us to pay very keen attention to what we call the demographic transition theory. Excuse me. Okay. So the demographic transition theory is a term that was first used by, excuse me for a minute. Okay, the demographic transition theory is a term that was first used by Warren Thompson in 1929, and later on by Frank W. Norstein. So from our first description, you can be able to see that there is Frank Norstein here, but you can see from this history that this term was first used by Warren Thompson. Then Frank W. Norstein, referring to his historical processes of change, which accounts for the trends in birth, death, and population growth that occur in today's industrialized society, especially in the European society. Now, the process of demographic change began for the most part in the later 18th century. So, from this state, you're able to see that Notstein proposed that Countries go through three main stages of population growth, from a high birth and death rate to low birth and death rates. This theory explains the demographic changes associated with industrial and commercial development. So, if you looked at the demographic transition theory, it will be systematically explaining for you how countries shift from having extremely high birth rates and death rates to having low birth and death rates. Now, when we're talking about low death and birth rates, you're talking about developed countries where you're able to see from the pyramids that we shared in the previous lectures that people are surviving more to their older ages than in societies or countries where there are still high birth and high death rates and people not surviving to the later stages. So So the demographic transition should not be regarded as a law of population growth. Not that every country it is a must or it is by law that they should follow that description of the population process that Notstein describes, but as a generalized description of the evolutionary processes. It is just trying to describe how countries have population processes and how their evolution occurs. In simple terms, it is a theory which attempts to specify general laws by which human population changes in size, structure during industrialization. It is frequently accepted as a useful tool in describing the demographic history of a country. The theory postulates a particular pattern of demographic changes from a high fertility and high mortality to a low fertility and low mortality. When a society progresses from a largely rural, agrarian, and illiterate society to a dominant urban, industrial, literate, and modern society. So, this is what the theory of demographic transition is telling you. It is trying to describe for you how societies modernize. It is typically viewed in three stages. The first stage being that the decline in immortality comes before the decline in fertility. The second being that the fertility eventually declines to match mortality. And the third, that socioeconomic transformation of a society takes place simultaneously with its demographic transformation. The demographics transition is characterized by conspicuous transition stages. So in stage one that you're seeing here as Roman 1, it is telling you that there must first be a decline in mortality before the decline in fertility. The number of people dying in a society must first decline before people have less birth. Why is this so? You could just tease your mind to understand this. But this simply means that because you're maintaining high death rates, people are worried that when they produce, majority of their children will not survive to the nearby age group, and therefore reproduction or birth is associated to protection, or it is associated to replacement, that if this one dies, I'm going to replace. This is per se very common in our societies if we were to reflect back, that a majority of the people produce 8 to 9 children and then say that possibly if two of them die, I would still be left with about 7, about 8, or about 6. So this is very key. The second is stating that the fertility will eventually decline to match the mortality. So, if the immortality or the number of people who are dying reduces, then fertility will reduce because people will see reproduction as a burden. If people can live to the nearest age, then there will be no need to produce for security. So it will be the fertility trying so much to match the mortality. If you take an example of countries that have their fertility rate at 2, meaning a woman in her lifetime will be producing 2 or 1 child, meaning they are trying to associate production of fertility to their mortality rates, meaning that out of that, those 2 children they are producing, they are very sure because their mortality rates are low, these 2 or 1 child shall be able to survive to the later stages of life. Now, if mortality and fertility reduce, then there goes to the third socioeconomic transformation of the society will start to take a simultaneous process because of the demographic transition. So it is very key for you to understand when we are talking about demographic transformation, we're looking at how death and births decline, which will then favor socioeconomic transformation. I hope that is quite clear in there. Yes, then let us go further and look at optimum population. Apart from, before we proceed with optimum population, is there any question someone would want to ask? Is there any question someone would want to ask apart from optimum population, the last 3 or 4 theories that we've discussed? Does someone have any question, or we can proceed? Okay, I think silence means that people are understanding. So let us go to what we call the optimum theory. The optimum theory of population. Now, Cannon's theory suggests that population should grow up to a certain desired level, beyond which further growth becomes harmful. It emphasizes the balance between population size, working population, and available resources for maximum production. Now, this theory is trying to explain to you that it comes from the word optimum. Now, optimum means full utilization of an individual's potential. That if you were to grow 5 meters tall, that you're able to grow 5 meters tall, and then you become extremely productive according to the capacity of a 5 meters tall person. So it comes from the word optimum, meaning that an individual is able to utilize its potential, in that it now suggests that the population will always grow to a particular level, a desired level where you're able to utilize this population. And oh, wait a minute. I think here. So the optimum theory of population was propounded by Edwin Cannon in his book Wealth, published in 1924, and it was popularized by Robbins, Dalton, and Carl Saunders of the London School of Economics. However, unlike the Malthusian theory, the optimum theory does not establish relationship between population growth and food supply. Remember, in our earlier discussion of the Malthusian theory, you were able to realize that for Malthus, he was trying to relate population growth to food supply. However, for the optimum theory of Cannon Edwin, for him, he is rather concerned with the relationship between the size of the population and production of health or of wealth. That is why he's an economist, and this is also another economical theory. Now, the Malthusian theory is a general theory. which studies the population problem of a country in keeping with its economic conditions because it is looking at food supply. However, the optimum theory is more realistic than the Malthusian theory. Why? Because the optimum population is the ideal population which, combined with other available resources or means of production of a country, will yield the maximum returns or income per capita. The optimum theory, for it, it is looking at which population, which size of the population can utilize these resources. So if you had resources for about 20 people, the optimum theory expects that because of your resources, you should be able to reach an optimum of 20 people in order for you to utilize these resources. So for it, it is trying to understand that in areas where there are more resources, there will be more people. In areas there are less that there are less resources, there shall be a lower population. Given these assumptions, the optimum population is that ideal size of the population which provides the maximum income per head. Now, any rise or diminishing or meaning reduction in the size of the population above or below the optimum level will diminish income per head. Now, this is meaning that if the population reduced, then it is going to lead to a reduction in an income per head. Why? Because the diminished population shall not be able to utilize the available resources in that particular country. Given the stock of natural resources, the technique of production, and the stock of capital in a country, there is a definite size of a population corresponding to the highest per capita income. Just to bring us to book and to give us a realistic perspective of the optimum population theory, if you looked at a company and what a company can do, assuming the cost of production was that a company can produce about 1,000 tons of goods. However, for an organization or for that company to produce about 1,000 tons of goods, it would mean that they employ about 1,000 individuals, meaning the population would be 1,000 and the resource would be also 1,000 tons. Therefore, any reduction, any reduction in that population would mean, therefore, that there is also a reduction in the number of tons that are produced. An increase in this population would also impact on the number of tons that are being produced, meaning that the resources would be overwhelmed than the ones they could accommodate. Therefore, the optimum theory only believes that the population should be the ideal population compared with the available resources. Now, those are the key theories of population that I wanted us to discuss. Are there any questions regarding the theories of demography that we've just discussed before we go into our last few slides? Is there any? Is there any question? Colleagues, there are no questions?
Let's move ahead.
Okay. So we want to do another introduction to another concept called the data collection methods in demography. And from our discussions, On migration, fertility, and mortality, we're able to arrive at how do we collect data, especially on these three main concepts of demography. There I'm talking about mortality, fertility, and migration. There are different data collection tools that we can use in collection of data. We classify them into direct and indirect methods. The direct methods include vital statistics registries. In direct methods, we're talking about individuals or collecting data per head, meaning that you're interacting with an individual and therefore you're able to get abstracts or the exact information about an individual from the individual per se. So the examples of these direct methods include the vital statistics registries. Now these registries track all our births and deaths, as well as changes in the legal status. For example, changes in marriage, divorce, and migration. They provide accurate data on birth and deaths in a country with well-established registration systems. They also provide key information on migration. Now, vital statistics are a widespread system. For example, in many of our countries, when you went to a hospital, you would realize that for every newborn, there is what they call a birth certificate that is either provided to you by the National Registration Bureau or it is given to you at the health facility. There is also a death certificate. Now, these are very key vital statistic registries that are used in trying to understand how many deaths occur and how many births occur in a particular country, because these are very key issues or uh, uh, information that helps us understand population changes in that particular country. However, when we're doing data collection for birth and deaths, we do not only look at whether this individual has been born or not. The entire registry contains your place of birth, it contains your date of birth, it contains details on the mother, details of the father, it contains nationality of the father, it contains the nationality of the mother, it contains further more details. All these details are very essential in as source of data for demography or in the demography of the country. Similarly, even in the death certificates, you'll be able to realize the reason for death, you'll be able to realize date of death, and you'll be able to realize the name of the deceased. So when these are entered into a system, it will automatically generate for you the number of individuals who have died and the number of individuals who have been added to the population. But also, the country has established different points of entry, and these are legal points of entry, where for every immigrant, details are taken, but also for any emigrant, any individual who wishes to leave the country, the details are taken. However, vital statistics are facing a lot of challenges in the countries, especially low developing countries that do not yet have established registration systems. For example, in many of our countries, including even South Sudan, you're able to see that there are still very many births that occur outside the health facilities. And because these births are occurring outside the health facilities at homesteads by traditional birth attendants, it is not possible for these births to be captured into the national registration system. If you looked at deaths, there are also deaths that occur in communities, and if you looked at our cultural perspective or the religious perspective, especially for the Muslims, for any death that has occurred, they would not take time to bury. So immediately this person is buried, and whether this one is captured in the national system, it is not known. But majority of the deaths that have occurred in such communities are not registered. Now, these are the challenges that the vital statistics is facing. Likewise, there are non-demarcated points of entry in many of the bordering districts or very many of the bordering uh, sub-counties in provinces. You will be able to see that people will leave the country without the notice or without any registration, and therefore this makes it a little hard for them to establish registration systems, but also further to accurately establish how many people are living or how many people are impacting on the population changes. Now, legal statuses like marriage, divorce, these are very key attributes in demography that help us determine what the population growth will be. When more marriages occur than more divorce, you will be able to know that in a particular country there is going to be an increase, or very soon you will have an increase in your number of birth. Why? Because new marriages are will definitely mean that there is going to be conception, and then you should be able to prepare. If you went to a society and did a research on the new marriages in terms of how many years, and you realize that a particular society in the last 1 year had a lot of marriages, then you should be able to expect in that particular society that there are going to be more birth, or the population is going to shoot. And in the next 5 years, you would be able to project that population if you subjected their contraceptive usage to their dates of marriage. So you'll be able to give them a picture of what will happen, and this is very key in planning. Similarly, divorce in a particular country or in a population can help you determine the next population pattern that will occur in that particular society. Because in a society that has more divorce cases or divorce rates, uh, you'll be able to realize that maybe in the near future, less people are going to conceive, and therefore you will be expecting uh, you'll be expecting lower population growth. So if you're a project or program manager, you would be able to say, we would rather take contraceptive programs or programs of family planning to countries or populations that have high divorce cases, because you would prospectively expect that they want these things if they are engaging in extramarital affairs. But if not, then if you took your family planning issues to people who have divorced, then you would hit a nag, because they do not have partners that can increase their chances of conception. Another data collection method that is seen as one of the accurate or one of the most important data collection tools or methods in demography, but also in establishing population sizes, is what we call the census, the national census that is conducted by national governments. Now, censuses aim to enumerate every person in a country. They collect information on individuals' characteristics such as age, sex, marital status, education, employment, geographical location. Census data can also provide insights into fertility and mortality rates, because a census is where you count every person in the country one by one. Now, health data just like we've said before, can be obtained from the general sources for demographic data, and including vital statistics, as I've said, censuses, general sample surveys, and from specialized sources such as sample surveys, clinical trials. This is just a brief of some of the data collection tools that we may not be able to look at in this module. But it is very key that you just don't limit your information into vital statistics or census or sampled surveys. You can even realize that there are administrative records on health, for example, disease registers, but also if you looked at outpatient registers in health facilities, you'll be able to realize that they are a very important data collection tool. But there are also epidemiological studies, surveys, weekly surveillance. These are very key ways of collecting data, but also clinical trials. So don't just limit your thoughts to those major three that we may be looking at in this module. Just to go back to what we call a census, from an example of the US Department of Health and Human Services, they periodically publish an international health data reference guidance, which presents an overview of international health data for vital statistics for majority of the countries. So if you went and looked at the international health data reference guide, you'll be able to realize that there's a lot of population health data. And I remember this module is about population and health. And now we are trying to show you where we are able to get population health data. The purpose of that information or that guide is to provide information about sources of health data around the world, useful for supporting international studies. Now, periodically, uh, population censuses have obtained information regarding conditions that we now term sensory, physical, and mental impairments. So if you looked at what we call a population census, you realize that it helps you get information that is is very critical in in your planning process. Like we said earlier, that it gives you an insight into your births and deaths. And because a census, which is mostly a 10-year periodic activity, uh, provides you with very key indicators that you can use in a space of 10 years to plan your country. Because from if you conducted a population census, you would be able to understand what are the main rates of population growth, and in the next 10 years you're able to project how your population will grow, because you would understand the migration patterns, but also the birth and fertility patterns, but also you would understand the patterns of contraceptive usage. So if you understand how all these factors that contribute to population growth play, so then you can be able to plan and be able to understand what are the key interventions that a country must undertake. So censuses, apart from those that are being carried today because of the technological advancements, many of them, especially in developing countries, have been using data collection using questionnaires. So people would be sent into the society and into the population to be counted, and they will be asked questions. And there are different types of censuses that would be conducted. There is de facto and de jure. And in de jure, you're trying to look at the individual that is found on spot. So many of our countries are conducting censuses of individuals that you will find. That is why it is called a household census, where uh, you are enumerated at the particular point that you were found at. Whether you're found where you would be enumerated. And most times people are given a holiday so that they are able to be counted. That is what a census is, and that is another direct way of collecting demographic health data. Now we let us look at the indirect methods. Now the sister method is what researchers survey women about their sisters, the sisters' birth and death experiences, allowing for indirectly estimated births and death rates for the entire population. Uh, I wouldn't want to have a deeper discussion on sister method, but what it simply gives us, it gives us our reproductive age, but also it gives us our reproductive replacement uh, rate. That what is the possibility that a country shall be able to replace its population. One, because I discussed with you earlier that men, majority of the men, or by nature, a man does not give birth, and therefore, it's the man's manifestation in reproduction is a little partial, and therefore, that is why the sister method is used to determine replacement method, but also it is used for determining the diminishing method. If in your country you have a larger population of females in one cohort than in the other cohorts, for example, what I'm trying to talk about is that if women aged 25 to about 30 were maybe 50% of the population, you would be very worried in a country, because in the next 10 years, if that population reached their menopause, you would have no population to help in continuous reproduction. So then your replacement level or your replacement rate would become a problem. That is what a sister method is. But for those who shall be undertaking lectures on fertility, you would deeply be able to understand what this replacement or sister method will be. Then there's also surveying relatives. These are indirect methods where you are surveying you're asking other people. Why? Because most times it is why these indirect methods are used, sometimes because of inaccuracies or timing. It is not easy for you to get accurate data from individuals. One, because maybe of their cultural or religious perspectives, but also some individuals may fear to discuss with you their individual related information. Therefore, it is only fair that you ask people who are close to them, so that you can be able to get a certain level of accurate data from them about them, or possibly even because the individuals you would target have perished or have died. And since they do not exist, you would want to understand, is your sister there? If your sister has died, or how many daughters did you have? How many children have you born? If there are six, of the six, how many children are alive? If there are four, then you will be able to definitely know that two of the children either died or two of the children migrated. So then you're able to intervene, or you're able to have a direct interview with these individuals and get accurate data. If we do not have any questions, I would want to stop there for today's lecture, and then we proceed with our lecture tomorrow. And then by possibly Friday, we shall be able to complete the module. So up to that far, if there are no questions, I would want to hand over the mic back to Ivan to tell him that I've concluded today's session, unless there are any more questions. Thank you for listening. Yes, Edward.
Yes, me, I'm just asking one question about the vital statistics registry. Okay, I mean the data collection, or if you collect these data, you enter, is there a system that is designed to a computer system where it can generate it automatically, or you do these things, you generate it manually? Because I'm seeing the content will be big, so I don't know whether there is any system so that you also have the idea. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you for that question. To respond, it might be unfortunate that I may not give you a picture of what happens in South Sudan because I'm a little not yet very well versed with their data system or their health data collection system. But for the case of the neighboring country, Uganda, there's what they call the National Identification Registration Authority. What happens is that it is given the mandate to register every birth and every death, and also award a birth and a death certificate to all individuals in the country. So what happens is that they design a simple tool, what they just call a birth registration, and they register your birth as an individual. But this flows from health facilities, and like you rightly said, there is a system, there is an electronic system through which these things are fed. So your information is just fed in the server, and we can nationally see how many people are given birth to in the entire country today. You're able to see tomorrow how many people, but also there is also a system that is placed at the points of entry to understand how many people are leaving the country at a particular time. So there is a national system, but to make it even better, there is a national agency that looks at collecting these vital statistics. That is what happens. Otherwise, if we are using writing and collecting this data, like you said, it would be a bulk data. Do I
All
answer your
right.
question? Yes.
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay. So if there are no questions, Ivan, I want to hand it over to you and ask that we continue from there tomorrow. Yes, Ivan.
Yeah, yes, yes.
Yes. I have concluded, and I was suggesting that we shall start there from there tomorrow.
It's okay.
All right. Have a good night.
At 6.
At 6, at 7.
No, it's 6 local time here. Hello?
Yes, please.
Yeah, it's 6 local time here. It's 7 Ugandan time.
Oh, oh, yes, yes. It is 7 Ugandan time and 6 local time. All right.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Have a good night.